All right, Eugene, talk us through your reporting. How would an indictment play out in Palm Beach?
Yeah, it is kind of like amazing, even the fact that we're having this conversation, right? I don't know that a lot of people thought we'd ever be talking about a former president even possibly being indicted. So you have these Palm Beach local officials working to kind of figure out how you would do that. If a president gets indicted, how would you handle an arrest? How would you handle this extradition? What do you do with the Secret Service if he has to sit in a jail? So these are the conversations that they've been having, because no one knows how this would work out, right? Trump has left Palm Beach and is in Jersey now, so the preparations may have been for naught unless any kind of indictment came down in the fall when he heads back. But there's, like you said, this interesting kind of aspect of a law where a Palm Beach official told Playbook that there's a statute that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis could potentially not comply with the extradition notice. And so that's something that is also an aspect of it. So they're having these conversations, trying to figure out how they could handle this. It's something you don't know what to do, because you can't just like roll up on a president because they have a Secret Service. So there are all of these aspects of it that they have to handle with care. We obviously don't know where Cy Vance is in that investigation. We know that it's intensified. We don't know if there's charges coming down. But the fact that they're having these conversations are remarkable in and of themselves.
Right, Jill, I wonder what it says to you that they're having those conversations. And if you can explain to us the extradition process, I mean, how could this all end?
Let me say that this is something that I had to face during Watergate as well, was we wanted to indict the president after he left office. And how would you go about that? Or while he was in the Oval Office, how would you actually serve papers on him? The extradition is something that should happen routinely. There is comity between states, and they normally would not even question it. There is no legitimate grounds, once there's a legitimate indictment in any state, for a governor of that state to object. Florida law does include something that gives a little extra power to the governor, but he has to have some legitimate reason for exercising it. And if there's a legitimate indictment, there is no reason for him to do that, in which case the defendant would have to answer charges in the state in which he is indicted. And I think that with Cy Vance, it will happen certainly before the end of the year. In New Jersey, the law is the same as in Florida, but the governor is a Democrat. And so there is a belief that he would not object to the extradition to New York to stand trial for charges.
Jill,
whereas
I want you to...
DeSantis.
I'm sorry, finish that thought.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just want you to set the stakes for us, because this would be the first charges against a former U.S. president. How important and how all of this goes down is a case of a test of our justice system.
Yes, it is. And I think that in a normal situation, and nothing about anything that Trump has done is normal, he would be charged based on a grand jury having done the investigation and having found substantial evidence. And in the case of a president, the grand jury is going to need more than reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt. With a president, a former president, the grand jury, not by law, but by practice, would be looking for absolute conclusive evidence that would lead to a conviction after a trial. And the rules are that a person is entitled to be transferred. This happens all the time. When a bank robber flees to another state, he's extradited back. When a shooter in Kenosha fled Wisconsin, fled back to his home state of Illinois, he was extradited back to Kenosha to stand murder charges. This is traditional in our criminal system, and we can't let anything stand in the way of our justice system. So he should be extradited and stand trial, assuming that there is an indictment. I had the privilege of interviewing Cy Vance, and he is expecting to make a decision before he leaves office at the end of the year. So that means that Donald Trump might be back at Mar-a-Lago with the protection of Governor DeSantis, or it might happen while he's still in his recess from Mar-a-Lago and is in New Jersey with a Democratic governor.